This is Howiedoinit, a podcast about resilience. Join me, your host, Howie Craw, as I explore the true stories of those who have been knocked down by life's biggest challenges and despite insurmountable odds, went on to achieve great success in both life and business. Become a master of resilience, and you'll see that anything is possible. Let's do this. Hi, everybody. It's Howie of the Howiedoinit podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Carole Mahoney with me. Carole is an expert on one of my favorite subjects. She's an expert on sales. She's all about selling. And when Carole and I start talking, you're just going to feel our passions come through. So, hi, Carole. Welcome.
Hi, Howie. I am excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. You know, this is a subject, sales, that I've been involved with my whole life, and I'm working diligently to get on more and more stages. And I'm kind of in awe at your career because I know that you're a coach. So how does one become a coach? And give us a little bit of a background how you got there.
I guess the way that you become, I don't know that it's so much that you set out. I didn't never set out to be a sales coach. In fact, if you had told me in high school or in college that this is what I would end up doing, I would have asked what you were taking and if I could have a couple, because there was just no way I could ever imagine or fathom that. And I think that the short way to get to sort of how I got there is with a question, actually, of your audience. Like, how many are listening right now and they hear Carole is all about selling and it's going to be all about sales, and there's some part of them inwardly where they cringed a little bit, like, ew, because so many of us have a negative mindset towards sales. And that's kind of how I ended up getting into sales. Was I actually had started my own business in the middle of a recession and found myself in a place where I had to confront my own mindset and beliefs about sales in order for my business to be successful, in order to feed my family, in order to support my kids. That it was a kind of a, not, I want to say life or death, but it was life, it was survival at that point that caused me to start taking a different perspective and steps to change.
You know, when you say that people cringe, I do hope that people stay with us throughout this podcast because there are so many subjects that I really want to touch upon. And this isn't going to be a sales training podcast. One of the biggest subjects that I really want us to talk about is the rejection, the resiliency. How do people put up with constant rejection? How do those people survive day in and day out dealing with no and all of the reasons associated with it when you're told by the people that you're working for that you have to sell and quotas have to be met? So, yeah, I remember from your story, though, that you kind of had an upbringing where sales were taboo.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs in the Boston area, and because my father passed away when I was really young and my mom was a single mom working, this was the 70s. This wasn't, there weren't a lot of options for women then. And it was one of those things where my grandparents were people I spent a lot of time with, and they owned their own businesses and they were entrepreneurs. And even as entrepreneurs, they kind of had this mindset towards sales where it was like a necessary evil. And I had my other grandmother who owned a real estate brokerage who was very much a salesperson, and she was always on and she was always selling, and she was looked down upon by the rest of my family because of her salesy ways. And so I grew up with these two kind of opposing mindsets about what sales were or was. And on top of that, I had someone who entered my life who was a used car salesman who was very abusive that didn't help my perception of sales very much. When you fast forward 10 or 20 years later to the point where I'm starting my own business, you and I have had this conversation. Sales is a numbers game, and that's one part of the equation. The other side of this, though, especially when you're talking about rejection, and it's a mindset, and the sales game is a head game. It's about the game that's happening in your head. And so when I look at how some of this has kind of transpired and how do we deal with rejection, we have to first understand where that feeling of rejection is coming from, because we tend to take it personally. We think that it's about us, which is kind of the motto of my coaching company, is that it's not about me. And when it becomes not about you, it's not about them rejecting you. It's maybe it's not the right time for them to address this particular problem, or maybe it's not you they're rejecting, maybe it's the company, maybe it's the product. And when you go into it with that mindset, you have to start examining where your beliefs are coming from in order to be able to overcome that. And just like I had to do growing up.
Right. And when we talk about sales and the way that you just said that, that's life.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many relationships that we're in that are as far away from work as possible, and what's going on in them and why aren't they working, and is it my fault? Is it the other party's fault? Is it the circumstances? Is it timing? There's so many things that drive that decision at any certain time. And I think we take rejection as rejection and take it personally, and it gets in the way of allowing you to go forward, to reach your goals, to do whatever it is. And it goes way beyond selling.
Yeah. I often say sales is life. And I quote the book Revolutionary Road. It's a fictional book, completely depressing book, but there's a quote in it that
Great.
says,
Great.
everything is, avoid the book, but this one quote, yeah, is everything is selling. Nothing comes in this world, nothing happens in this world until someone makes the sale. And if you don't believe me, imagine where you would be if your father hadn't sold your mother on the idea. Uh, I remember when I was going through sales coaching myself so that I could start getting a different results for my business and ultimately for my clients. I had two young kids at home. I remember at one point them saying to me, I don't know what it is that you're doing, but we feel like you're a better mom. Like I became a better mom and spouse and sister and daughter by going through some adjustments to how I thought about things, to adjusting my mindset of sales, including rejection, including needing someone's validation and approval, including being able to manage and control my emotions in a way that helped me to more clearly see what was happening with others so that I could help them. That's ultimately what sales is about. It's about connecting problems and solutions. It's about helping people to make decisions that are going to make the world a better place. And I think that we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to those around us to start thinking of sales as a mental game. You and I met during the Patriots' massive Super Bowl party last year. And
Yes.
you look at that organization and it is as much, if not more than a mental game than it is a physical game. And like you look at their defense right now, I'm gonna just go on a Patriots rant for a second. Is
Well, why
they've
would you?
had
What's
more
their record? Let's just for the record, what's their record right now?
7-0, I believe,
And
and
and I got
but
to tell
I
you this: they're 7-0. My Jets are, I think, 1-6. Sam Darnold seeing ghosts. It's another Jets year, but as a Jet fan, I respect the Patriots. I am all
mhm,
about what they do. I was walking and running this morning with a buddy, and we were talking about how the world dislikes Tom Brady. We had a
mhm.
10-minute discussion on how it could be humanly possible that people don't like him. What is he doing wrong other than outworking the competition, working harder than everybody, showing up? He's 42 years old and he's going to go
Mhm.
probably win another Super Bowl. Why is
Why
it
do they
though?
hate him?
Why do people hate him?
My personal opinion, like we in New England, the haters, will be haters. They hate us because they ain't us. But I think also too, I think they throw the hate around to see if they can mess with his game, which is a mental game, and it's frustrating because he doesn't need their approval.
It is amazing and why people would hate somebody that's wearing all those Super Bowl rings, seems to have a nice marriage, beautiful children, all the trappings that come with it, and not a bad guy. He's not doing things like domestic violence, drug abuse. I mean, what did they get him for? A couple of ounces of air in a football? That I think was ridiculous. But I just agree with you that the Patriots, from top down, from ownership to manager to players, it's a mental game, and they play it really well.
Mhm. Yeah. And these are lessons that we can take back to sales and to life. And maybe that's one of the reasons why people are so envious and hateful of Brady. We tend to compare ourselves to others, and how do you compare to that?
It's such a wasted emotion, hate. I don't get it. And if anything, I think the word respect and what the owner chooses to do in his private life, that shouldn't define Tom Brady. It has nothing to do with
Right.
Bill Belichick. It wasn't like they were in the car or the driver. But I think we better move on because I will lose listeners because they're Patriot haters. So I'm walking a fine line here. I respect them and I'm happy for you. And I'll look forward to watching that big game with you again if it should happen because I will be live. I'm going this year. It's here in Miami.
I'm going to be tailgating, so I'll meet you there. And I will only say this last thing about the Patriots to close with it in that subject. I've been a fan since before they were the enterprise that they are now. I remember losing the Super Bowl to the Bears. I remember crying on the way home. And I think that's the lesson to take away from this is that Tom Brady was what, 95th draft choice or something along those lines. And now look at where they are. And they have the same opportunities that everyone else did. They worked harder and they mastered the mental game. Any of us can do that.
That's amazing what you just said because all my mind clicks to is the Jets. The Jets have the same opportunity as the Patriots, but yet year after year, we don't perform. So that's the sales world. You know, we manage sales teams. I've worked with some of the best salespeople in the world and some of the worst. And really, what makes the difference, I think, is in work ethic, in transparency, repetition, and one of the most important things in sales is kind of like what you and I have, a relationship. We met, we kept in touch, talk about each other's families, we know about our hobbies. It goes beyond. It's a relationship. So I preach the value of relationships in this technology age. What's your thought on that?
I think that if you think of technology as it's like anything. It's like think back to how communication started way back when it was writing on the stones. It was then they invented the letter and paper, and then it was phone lines, and then it became fax machines, and now we have the internet. Technology is a means to an end. It's the train that gets us from point A to point B. You still need people to get on the train, and you still need people that want to go from point A to point B. So technology in the sense that it doesn't I don't see it as something that replaces that human connection if used correctly and put in its proper place with ideas of how it's going to enhance the human connection. So a lot of people are talking about AI and it's going to replace all of these different types of sales jobs. And there's an element of truth to that because the order takers, the people that are just checking the boxes, those are going to be replaced by machines. But the human connection, the relationship, people still need that feeling, that chemistry and trust built because we're not at the stage yet where we're ready to leave our, sort of life changing decisions to machines that can't feel. We're not there yet. I don't know if we'll ever get there yet, but that's what sales is for.
I totally agree. And is it true that you really watched Al Gore flip the switch when the internet was invented?
I wasn't actually there, but I went to college in 1993, which was around the same time that the internet became commercially available. It was not just for scholarly or military use. And my communications professor showed me the World Wide Web and email in the basement of the computer lab that at that time was in the basement of the college because that was, trendy. And I remember sitting there in the class, and at the time I was studying to become a journalist and thinking to myself, this is going to change everything. It's going to change the way that we communicate. It's going to change the way that and when you change the way that we communicate, that has political implications. It has, relationship implications. It has business implications. And you ever have that voice in your head, that intuition that tells you to do something and you just follow it just out of sheer instinct? That voice told me everything I learned in the next 4 years is going to become obsolete because it's going to change everything. And so I much to my mother's delight, and decided I was going to have my family and my kids and see what happened with this whole internet thing. And I still participated in the internet, and I was in chat rooms. I was, a very early blogger for like online magazines, and I started seeing that the implications that this had. Like, there was a time where like people's divorce rate went up because they were finding people on Facebook or other chat sites. Businesses, entire business industries were starting to either evolve or dissolve because of the internet. And so when I say I watched Al Gore flip the switch, I was one of the first people to see the internet. And because of that, I had this kind of intuitive sense of the impact that that might have and acted accordingly.
That's amazing. You're bringing back memories for me because right around that time, 93, my son was born. And I remember getting a computer and a guy coming over and telling me that I could go to this thing, www dot, and that I could put a credit card in and I could buy something. And I was like, what is this? And I remember, and I made a password with my son's name, which everybody eventually knew I had, so I had to change my password. But that was right around 93. He was born in December of 93. And boy, we watch it come and explode and grow. And the thing that's really amazing in the world of sales is the CRM. And, it's called the Customer Relationship Manager, which I have renamed the Cash Register Machine, because the better you are in using it, what you put into it is what you get out of it. And I've watched so many people thrive, grow, and do so well that make that their best friend. And then you get some old school people like, hey, I don't need that. It's not a matter of needing. Like you said before, take advantage of the technology and the tools that are being built for us. It could only make you more efficient.
Yeah, I think the moral of the whole story is that you have to be willing to adapt and be agile. And that means not holding on to those things the things that got you where you are not necessarily the things that are going to get you to where you want to go. And I think I also remind people when we talk about technology and when we talk about trying to adapt and grow is that we're never promised the destination. We're only promised the journey to get there. And if that journey means learning, it is. It means learning as we go and how to apply that and continuing to improve and make the world around us better. Technology is one piece of that. It's a huge piece of that because of the way that it has impacted everybody. Like CRMs have impacted sales, but you still need that human element there. There's an art and there is a science to relationship and communication and therefore sales.
And isn't that true in life? I mean, relationships, as we know, we kind of missed growing up texting, but it's a big part of our life now. But to the younger generation, they don't have the skills. And that could be a whole conversation in itself. But what I love what you just said is that we're guaranteed a journey, but not a destination. And what are you going to do with your journey? And adapt is a word that I love because we are in a changing environment and a changing world, and every relationship that you're involved in changes. That's the one thing that's guaranteed. Things change. So, what do you tell people to be effective, to build those relationships, deal with rejection while we're on this journey?
I think ironically enough, my youngest son recently asked me for dating advice. Speaking of relationships, and the advice that I gave him is a lot of times the same advice that I give to salespeople and sales managers and sales leaders and executives of companies. And that is, you have to remember to make it not about you. As human beings, our first tendency is to think about what's in it for us. It's our survival instinct, it's our reptilian brain, whatever you want to call it, whatever science you want to apply to it. And so if you want to build relationships, if you want to be adaptable, you have to be able to take yourself outside of the what is it in it for me realm and be able to focus on what's really valuable to this person. how am I going to make this experience, this conversation better for them? What is it that they're trying to accomplish? That's how we start to establish and build trust. Like, if you've ever talked to that person who in the first 5 minutes they've told you their entire life story, told you everything about them, and then walk away without asking you a single question about you, that's not a relationship building. That's a show up and throw up and then walk away kind of thing. And sometimes we do that without even realizing it. And so that is the first thing I say. It's why I repeat it over and over again.
I love
There is
that
a
show up
book.
and I love that show up and throw up because, having spent 25 years around money and Wall Street, I got to see it all. And I know that so many times I'd meet people that were just so full of themselves that within 5 minutes, they would just tell you everything, tell you how great they are. Never once did they ever say, "How are you? Be human. Do you have a family? What are your children's ages?" Like just for a minute, just divert a minute and like let's build a relationship here. What do you do? What are your hobbies? And it's not always about the sale. It's not always about the money. It's about a two-way relationship. And I was always so turned off to one-way relationships. And I think what you said is so true. When you think about what's in it for the other person and how you can help them and how you can help make their dreams, their goals, their aspirations, whatever it is, if you could find a way to help them, that's the best feeling. And when you meet those, I call obnoxious people, it's hard because they know it all. They don't need anything because they think they know it all. And it's hard to penetrate those people, but we all can learn. Learning's a wonderful thing. And you mentioned a book earlier. And, I think reading, I'm learning more and more, is that some of the brightest and most brilliant people just read they read all the time. They don't stop. And I'm trying, it's something that I'm trying to do as a person that's always been on and selling. My biggest challenge is listening, being quiet. And what's your feeling about listening?
Listening is a misunderstood art and science. I think that we have, like we all have personality styles, we all have listening styles. There's a company actually that's called Echo Listening that they do actually an assessment of what your listening style is, kind of like you would get a disc assessment of what your communication style is. The whole point of any assessment is to be able to learn more about your strengths and your hidden weaknesses. And so listening is an art form in that when you're truly listening to someone, it's not that you're listening trying to figure out what's my next question going to be. It's not that you're listening trying to figure out what's in it for me or trying to think of something while you're listening. You're just present in that moment with that person, which is incredibly hard to do because we have how many tens of thousands of thoughts that run through our brains any given minute. And so being able to quiet your mind as a practice so that you can be fully present in the moment, that is how you truly listen. That is how you're truly able to engage with someone. And a lot of salespeople, a lot of people worry about remembering what they said. And there's ways and techniques that you can do that to remember what someone said by repeating back what you heard. Um, if you've ever worked in a restaurant with a kitchen and a staff, you've probably seen this happen where the wait staff comes in, says something in the kitchen, and the kitchen has to repeat it back so that they know that they heard it correctly. There are little things like that that you can do to help you to listen better, but underneath all of it is being present in the moment with the person you're listening to and communicating with. It's hard to do. It's simple, but it's hard.
Alan Stein, who you probably know because we met through some courses that we took together. Alan was the one that recommended me to that. Alan wrote a book, and I quote his line every day on my live videos in the morning: be where your feet are. And the problem in today's society, people have a cell phone in one hand that's just constantly driving, distractions, and you got all those thoughts in your head. And I think when you are in a say, I don't say I think, I know when you have the opportunity to make that sales call or presentation, you need to be 100% focused. You need to be where your feet are, and you need to be in listen mode. And people like myself who struggle with listening, I've found that meditation helps. Spend 10 minutes a day meditating, quieting your brain down. And then when you're in these situations, you could reflect upon, I can get quiet, I can do this, I can listen.
Yeah. I used to struggle with meditation so much. And I know a lot of people out there do because I'm one of those go, go, go people. Like I blue collar entrepreneurial family. If you weren't doing something at every moment of every day, you were lazy. And so for me to be able to stop and be quiet and be calm is difficult because that was not the environment I grew up in. And so you have to find ways to make these habits work for you. So for me, I have to go for a walk. I have to do a few minutes of yoga. I have to get the physical energy out before my mind can be quiet enough for me to be able to meditate. But 15 minutes a day to start with is all you need to start to change a habit and or create a new one. I think meditation is definitely one of those things. There's also some, it's one thing to meditate, but then you also want to replace some of the beliefs that you have about things with new beliefs, which meditation can help you be aware of. But sometimes you need to also do some guided meditations to replace the beliefs that maybe aren't serving you very well. They're limiting you.
A lot of people too come in every day in sales and they do the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome. I think that's the definition of insanity. You have to shake things up. If something's not working, after really doing it for a while and consistently, the problem I see too is that people will come in on a Monday and say, I'm going to do it this way. They make 32 calls. It didn't work. They give up. I always use this line. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Repetition, repetition, repetition. Practice, practice, practice. Not going to go back to the Patriots, but that's how they win. They just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And yes, sales is a numbers game, but you also need to have your heart in it. You need to be able to listen. Listen to what the customer is telling you, the lead. So many times they're giving you the sale if you would just stop and listen. And now, a word from our sponsor. I would like to thank everybody over at Cruiseport Conference Center and offices. See, they offer state-of-the-art meeting spaces in the heart of sunny Fort Lauderdale, just minutes from the beach, real close to the Fort Lauderdale International Airport and Port Everglades. From phone calls to live streaming, Cruiseport Conference Center and offices has you covered. With Cruiseport Conference Center and offices, you can come and go as you please. With 24/7 coded access, you can work anytime, day or night. I suggest you go through the notes here, click on the website, and check out the floor plans. I know, I'm glad I did. It's an amazing place. And now, back to our show. What do you find in your coaching business people are coming to you for the most? Is there something that is a common thread regardless of the industry or the product that people are selling? Is there a common thread that you would draw that says this is really what's in the mindset that's getting in the way?
There's about six common threads that I see and that you can actually measure for and evaluate for. And there's skill sets that are associated with those common threads. So a lot of times the things that I'm seeing that salespeople and sales managers come to me for is that they're struggling with, for example, they'll say the outward things like I need to make quota or I need to go over quota or these particular behaviors or outcomes are things that I need to fix. But when we start digging in underneath of what is going on, a lot of times it's like you said that they're not listening and asking questions. And they're not listening, and that usually means that they are what I call they have emotional involvement in something. And so that whole thinking in your head, strategizing or scrambling or freaking out when they ask you a question you don't know the answer to can cause you to become emotionally involved. You start going into your head and then you stop listening. And when you stop listening, you don't realize what the next question is that you need to ask. Another thing that both sales managers and salespeople struggle with when they come to me is because they're struggling in knowing what questions to ask. What are the right questions? When are the right time to ask those questions? How to phrase those questions? How to think of those questions? And it can be a range of things from that emotional control that we talked about to needing the approval of the other person. If you need someone's approval, you won't ask them the tougher questions. You won't ask them the questions that might get them to think because you don't want them to ever chance that they might get upset with you or that they might not think you're the most smartest person in the room. That's a need for approval from the other person, which will prevent you from asking the most insightful question you can to help them to think through their problem. Other things that I see are, believe it or not, there is a large percentage of salespeople who have issues in talking about money and discussing money, as do managers. And you have to be able to be comfortable with talking about money and discussing and coming up with creative ways to solve problems and pay for things. There's, other things like the fear of rejection, which that fear prevents them from prospecting, from going out and finding more people to talk to. Those are some of the things that I see as common denominators that then undermine their competencies and their skill sets, which then come from their beliefs. And a lot of them are coming to me because they have an outward problem of meeting quota, of getting more revenue. And what we're finding is that these are the things that are underneath those layers that until we address those, you'll never be able to learn the skill set or be able to adapt that skill set because it's still inside of your head. And it's interesting when we talk about sales being life, a lot of the salespeople and managers that I've coached have come to me years later and said, I proposed to my girlfriend of years and years later. I was able to do this personal particular thing. I would have never been able to do it without you, to which I kind of laugh a little bit because I'm not like the artist here. They're the ones that had it within them, and I was just able to help them to find it or to bring it out or to give them the confidence to be able to go out there and do it. Not that I have a magic special sauce. I'm just infinitely curious and want to help them. The other thing I think that I see too, and we talked a little bit about resiliency. I think it was Covey who said, seek first to understand rather than to be understood. If you look at that and that curiosity that we build in those relationships and connections, essentially a lot of times in coaching, that's kind of what I'm trying to do is help develop that curiosity. Why do you think it's happening? What would a different outcome look like? How would you possibly get there? Now let's practice that. You practice before, repeat, deliberate practice. What specific thing, belief, mindset, or skill set that we need to work through in order for you to get to that next level? And it brings me joy is when you see them get to that next level and they're accomplishing so much more than they ever thought was possible.
So that's a lot there, and that's really great and insightful. How about persistence? When is a salesman too pushy, or is he never too pushy, or she is when is too much enough? And how do you tell when I mean I know obviously from my own personal experiences when to back off, but you know I recently went to Grant Cardone 10X, and I've never been around such selling like that. That's just sell and sell and sell more because they believe in what they're doing and feel like they're not doing the customer or the lead justice until they're sold.
So persistence is, I call it polite persistence. So there's the kind of persistence where it's devoid of any personalization. It's devoid of any reason or value adding. It's just, did you make a decision yet? Are you ready to buy yet? Are you ready to buy yet? That's not the kind of persistence that I would, I guess, approve of, I guess you could say. But persistence more in the terms of, I look at it like this. If you were walking down the street and there was somebody bleeding on the sidewalk, are you the kind of person who's going to walk by and wait for them to raise their hand for help? Or are you the kind of person who's going to, no matter what they say, no matter how much they say that they're fine, there's a bone sticking out of their leg, you're going to call 911 and get them help because you know that they need it?
I would
That's the
call.
kind of mindset that you need. Yeah,
I would
most of us
call.
say, well, we would call. So we can apply that same mindset to sales. And think of persistence as, do they have a problem that I can solve and help them with? And do they know that it's a problem, and do they want it solved? If you can answer yes to those three questions, then it is your duty to be persistent. And when they tell you, nope, the project, we've decided to go in another direction, or we've decided that this project is no longer a priority, that doesn't mean you stop the communications altogether. You still stay in touch with them over a period of time because, like you said before, things change.
Right. So I hear you, and I think that, what I'm getting from all of this is that in sales, you do your homework, you do your research, you're there to add value to whatever it is, but that these same lessons that work in sales work in everyday life. And in order to live the fullest life or be the best salesperson you can be, it's being able to help others, doing your homework, listening, having perceived value, and just doing it in a way that's meaningful, helpful, with an end game that everybody wins.
Yes, everybody can win, even when in sales, sometimes you either won the deal or you lost the deal. It's like the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset, you lost the deal, there's nothing more that you can do, give up and walk away. Growth mindset, we haven't won the deal yet, and here's what we can learn about it to apply to the next deal and the next one after that, so then when it's time, we're ready.
Right. Well, I appreciate your time today. It's been great being with you, and I thank you for having me on your show a few weeks ago. That was great. I really enjoyed it, and we talked a lot about a lot of great subjects. I will put a link to that show in our show notes, so if anybody wants to go back and watch that, they'll certainly be able to, as well as, we'll put a link to Unbound Growth, the name of your company. And if anybody wants to watch, I know you have a whole library of videos that I've watched a bunch. One's better than the next. So congrats on all the work you're doing. Those are awesome.
Thank you.
A couple of easy, quick layup questions. Your favorite sports team?
Oh, that's an easy one. Patriots.
I can't even imagine what it's like to be a fan of an organization. I mean, I'm a Yankee fan, and, they're great, but they haven't won a World Series in a decade. So although we have so many championships, we've been void of one for a while. Okay, favorite food?
Anything vegetarian.
Great. Love the movement. Favorite book?
Fiction or nonfiction?
Either way, you could name one or two that you'd recommend that you love.
All right. I'll give my latest favorite book is The Code of Trust, which was written by Robin Dreeke.
Great. And are you a TV watcher at all?
Somewhat. I'm more of a book reader, but my husband and I do sometimes watch TV. The latest series that we're watching is Castle Rock on Netflix. I think it's Netflix. That was it's being written and directed or produced by Stephen King, which I live in Maine, so I am a huge Stephen King fan.
Awesome. That's great. So a little peek into your personal life when you're not coaching or taking care of your family or rooting for the Patriots. We see you like to read and watch a little TV. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Carole, for being here. I really appreciate your nuggets, and I hope that our communities continue to get out of our conversations what I get out of talking to you every time that we get together.
It's always fun, Howie. Thanks for having me on.
Have an awesome day, and thanks so much for your time.
You got it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode of Howiedoinit, hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to today's show notes, including links to all the resources mentioned, visit Howiedoinit.com. That's HOWIEDOINIT.com. Until next time, stay resilient and keep pushing forward.